How you doing? My name is Robert Riley, and this is my producer's podcast. I chose to do my presentation on an independent producer by the name of Mark Neill. He's been in the music industry since 1979 as a player, an engineer, and as a producer. And on top of that, he's built studios for numerous artists who still enjoy success in the music industry today. Neill was raised on a farm in southern Georgia where he built his first project studio in a tobacco barn. He began his career as a musician at the age of 7 and first picked up the tuba, drums, and upright bass in the school band. At the time, in Georgia, there was a very hot independent music scene, and Neill began playing with a lot of local gossip and family-oriented rockabilly bands. The first instrument he ever really mastered was the electric guitar, which led him down a path towards acoustical and analog mastery. Growing up in the early 60s, Neill's parents listened to a lot of R&B, which included the likes of John Lee Hooker and Muddy Waters. I chose to research his career because of the work he did on the last Black Keys album, which was Brothers. It was their 6th full-length album, and the sound quality was quite different than anything they had done before. And they worked with a lot of big producers, including one of my favorites, which was Danger Mouse. So I wanted to know why that album was different. One of the first differences between the album Brothers and any other album the Black Keys had worked on before was where it was recorded. They traveled down to Alabama to record in Muscle Shoals Studio, which is actually a pretty historic studio. It's been home to artists including the Rolling Stones and Bob Dylan, to name a few, and aside from 4 tracks on the Brothers album, the entirety of the CD was recorded there. Neill actually recalled in an interview about how when working in the studio, he and the Black Keys were very sensitive to the vibe of the area, which heavily influenced the album and took it in the direction that it went, which is why if you go back and listen, there's a lot of soul music and R&B from the early 60s intertwined in a lot of those tracks. The album was actually recorded completely analog without any use of Pro Tools, which is cool. Neill engineered both the recording process and the preliminary tape mixing before handing it over to the actual mix engineer, Chad Blake. In an interview, Neill actually claimed that he only used 1 or 2 mics on a session at a time to capture an entire performance. That's both Dan and Pat playing drums and guitar, which I think gives the sound of the album a much more deeper and spaced out feeling. One of the best features of the album was actually the sound of Dan's vocal. It was very rich. And Neill actually talks about the recording process extensively in one of his interviews. Normally he actually uses a U47 tube microphone, but for this album he actually chose to use a KM184 and aimed it at the lead singer's forehead, which according to him gave it a much more thick tone. And he cranked his tube mic pre about 3 o'clock and left the analog rotary fader at about 10 o'clock. And as he would record, he would ride the fader to capture all of the little nuances in Dan's vocal, which is why it's so detailed and rich, because there's absolutely no compression on it. He actually received a Grammy for the entire production. That was his first Grammy award, and on top of that, for the last 12 years, he's actually been building a lot of analog studios. He talks about in an interview that all the studios he has built have been used by artists who still enjoy success in the music industry today, which is pretty cool. He mentioned a little bit about the way he designs his studios using Solomon's rule, which is the math of the universe. Neill seems kind of spaced out, so it makes sense. I know from what I've heard off Keep It Hid, which is Dan Auerbach's solo album recorded completely at Neill's studio, that his sound is definitely unique, and I definitely think it's starting to catch on as the antithesis to pop music. I think producers like Mark Neill are bringing that back. And that is the end of my podcast. I hope you learned something new, and have a nice day.